Would someone, anyone, please sing a love song? Today, we begin this show where all great things begin, in love. How we talk about it, how we think about it, and how the digital age has changed how we love.
And that's what love is. Love's got your back.
It's a reaching, it's a yearning, it's an aching.
I think silence prohibits expectations.
Are we being heard? Are we being seen?
I think people feel safe when they can define you.
We created this show because the world is changing. I'm joined by two incredible women, both of whom have influenced how I think about love a great deal. My first guest could easily be called the greatest living American poet. She's a legendary wordsmith, changemaker, and literary icon. The winner of an astounding 7 NAACP awards, author of 3 New York Times bestsellers, a distinguished university professor at Virginia Tech, and my personal literary hero, Miss Nikki Giovanni. Thank you for joining us today.
That's my pleasure.
I take no issue in calling my next guest the smartest person in print, a prolific young culture critic and writer, named a Forbes 30 Under 30 emerging figure in media, and a National Magazine Award winner, and now a columnist for The New Yorker. Please welcome Miss Doreen Saint Felix.
Thank you for having me, Bianca. I'm so happy to be with you, Nikki.
It's a pleasure. I subscribe to your magazine.
Oh, thank you. The reason I can eat.
Today we're talking about love, and Miss Giovanni, I would be so remiss if I passed up the chance to say I love you. In fact, I built this show around you. Back in the summer of 2018, I had just finished at Columbia, and I saw that it had gone viral, the video that you did in 1971 with James Baldwin. And you were 28, you were Doreen and I's age, and he was about 52, and you all had this incredibly prolific, revolutionary conversation about love, tenderness, revolution, and I thought we should have conversations like that all the time.
A guy's going with girl. You're going with Maybelle. And Maybelle gets pregnant. All of a sudden, you can't speak to Maybelle because you don't have the money for a crib, right? She doesn't need a crib. The baby's gonna sleep someplace. But what she needs is a man to come by and say, hey, baby, you look good. And black men refuse to function like that because they say, I want to bring the crib when I come.
Baby,
you're never going to get the crib.
Baby. In this civilization, a man who cannot support his wife and his child is not a man.
There was this passion that you had, youthful passion, and he was so patient with you. And so I thought to myself, we need intergenerational conversations like that. And I said my first guest has to be Nikki Giovanni. And so thank you for being here today. Thank you.
It's totally my pleasure, but I was patient with Jimmy.
Yeah.
I know he was patient with me, but I was patient.
Doreen, you've seen the conversation.
Absolutely.
And there's
so many times I can't even count. There's a time when you tell him that you wish that the lies that a man goes out and tells to the world in order to survive, in order to, bring back money to the family, that those same lies you wish he could just tell you. Lie to me.
Of course you can lie to me. And you will. If you love me and you're going off with Maddie someplace, you're lying to me.
Yeah,
And
that's
Jimmy
the famous
is
line, lie to me.
in that
and he's
moment.
stuck. And I'd never seen James Baldwin stuck in my life. And I said, this is something special. And so that's really where the show came about, is I was like, we need young people coming together with the legends and the icons and really talking about the state of the world today. And so I wanted to start it with love because that's where it started for me.
But I just wrote a poem for a book that I work with. It's a nonprofit. They do poetry.
Right.
And she asked me, her name is Jerry. Jerry said, we need a poem to open it. And I said, okay, and I wrote a poem, Fall in Love. But you have to fall in love with a book because it's the only thing that will fall back in love with you. I love that.
I love that too.
You can count on a book. A man comes and goes, a woman comes and goes, but a book, damn it, is there all the time.
Yeah, there's no two-way street, It's just, you show up for it. Yeah, people, I love the term meet me on the page.
Right.
Meet me on the page tonight. And I feel like, a lot of my love life, especially my early romantic life in like 7th grade, 8th grade, it was just reading romantic novels, thinking that's exactly how it was going to be. And that was nothing of how it ended up being. And I realized it's because I could write the lines for the other person.
Right.
You know, I was like, I'll do your lines and then I'll do my lines. And then in real life, you do your lines and then the other person does theirs and they're way off script. And I was pretty pissed when I was like 18. In that interview with James Baldwin, you say love is a tremendous responsibility, to which Baldwin replies, it's the only responsibility to take. There isn't any other. This may be very meta, so interpret it however you will, but have we failed in that responsibility?
I think that we confuse love with sex, basically. And I don't know, I don't go back and look at what I've done, so I'm probably the only person here that hasn't gone back to look at what Jimmy and I did. But it's the easy thing to do because sex is really, you know, totally a lot of fun. I certainly recommend it. Not a lot of it, but, you know, every now and then it's a good idea. And love is a responsibility because you make a commitment. When you love someone, you make a commitment, whether it's my grandmother, I love my grandfather, but my commitment was always with grandmother. Yeah. And anything that I needed to do, I was going to do. And that's what love is. Mm-hmm. Love is that I'm here for you, or as our friend, and we were talking about her earlier, and we all miss her, Toni Morrison said, you know, love is a bench. I don't think she said it exactly that way. I wish Toni was here with us. Mm-hmm. But love is a bench. And a bench is something that no matter what, when you're tired, when you're sad, you can sit. It's going to be right there, and it's got your back. And that's what love is. Love's got your back.
You know, another thing that Toni said that I love, love is unmotivated respect. And I think also James Baldwin said love is a growing up, love is a battle, love is a war. And I think all of those things we have great difficulty with. The growing up part for me, though, especially. Doreen, what do you think?
So it's so interesting. My first encounter with love was within religion, which is not where anyone should meet the idea of love, because in that case, love is coercion. I was raised in the Catholic Church. My family is West Indian, they're from Haiti. And so we have a very complicated relationship with the church in that it was the cipher through which a lot of the indigenous practices that had been brought back from the continent could be kind of, you know, funneled through some of the sacraments, you know. Right. So you have people who are praying to the Virgin Mary, but it's not really the Virgin Mary. Right. She's a representation of a goddess that we haven't been allowed to praise outright. And that's all to say that for me, growing up, love was something that I thought I always had to give to an entity with nothing in return. I was very much raised in that tradition of love is conditional, right? So you have to be good enough in order to be loved. And so at this point in my life, just turned 30, I'm still doing that unlearning. Yeah. And I'm still kind of convincing myself that I am worthy of love just as I am. Not necessarily in the context of earning it, which, you know, when I was a child, I had no idea how deeply I was being indoctrinated by the church. And it's taken a very long time to even notice that the indoctrination isn't natural, because it can feel so natural, I think.
Well, one thing you said about earning it, for me, that's really where it comes in. For millennials and Gen Z, I feel like we're a city girls generation. You know, we're very transactional when it comes to love. And I think it's because patriarchy still very much exists, but a lot of the responsibilities of patriarchy where, you know, a man was supposed to bring the bread home and the dinner and, you know, work and be present, we don't even have that part of patriarchy anymore. So now it's kind of like, especially among Black women, I think it's one of those, what are you going to do for me if you come into my life? You know, because we have all the freedom of feminism and, you know, we don't even have equal pay yet, but we're looking for, I mean, at least with my friends, a lot of times I feel like women are asking, what are you going to do for me? Like, I can earn so much for myself. Yeah, besides a warm bed and, you know, maybe some fleeting romanticism, where is your part? What are you bringing to the table is a question I hear constantly and constantly. So when you think about earning it, I think that's right. Very, very poignant.
But don't you think that fantasy of, you know, the 1950s relationship that was toxic, but the man did bring something to the table, don't you think that was a fantasy in some ways.
Oh, I reject it entirely. I don't know if...
But that it was like maybe not even historically really true.
No,
right?
it wasn't, but I think that's the thing. It's a popular fantasy that's now, especially with social media, where people, they want picture portrait love, picture portrait marriage. You know, they fall in love with the fantasy of, oh, someone's going to come and rescue me. And it's something that you see even more so probably now in popular media, this idea that, you know, a rich guy rescues a beautiful damsel in distress. Like, these are cliches that we have repurchased into, I feel like, in the modern era. And I know for your generation, Miss Giovanni, that was an oppressive idea. Like, this idea that a man would, you know, bind... My grandma, she used to say, be careful, because a bracelet can quickly turn into a handcuff. And I think, you know, for you all were very much more vigilant over your sense of love and over your sense of self. But I find that, at least for heterosexual women in Manhattan, like cosmopolitan, elite, educated women, a lot of them are just like, what are you going to do for me that I couldn't do for myself? And I feel like that's a very constricting way to think about love. You know, for me, I think that it's, I mean, of course, get your needs met every time, and people always talk about that and self-care, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think the whole conversation we're having is interesting because, I mean, I'm interested in what I'm older than everybody here. I recommend old age, but we're just talking, you know, fairy tales. We're just talking fairy tales. We forget, everybody said, you know, Snow White is out there, and the prince comes along and kisses her. That's not what happened. If you study the fairy tale, Snow White didn't wake up until she had the baby.
Which means she was great.
Of course, but that's what happened. I really totally hate the way we have now treated Little Red Riding Hood, because we forget that was about the plague. That could have been done right here. Little Red Riding Hood was about the plague in Europe. And we know that her mother, and it almost makes me cry, it brings tears to my eyes. We know her mother gave the last bread and the last meat. This was a Polish dried meat to this child and said, go to your grandmother. Because all of us went to our grandmothers. I did, I don't know about you, I'm not asking, but we went to our grandmothers. When my father and mother fought so much that I couldn't take it anymore, I went to my grandmother, and that's who I lived with. But Little Red Riding Hood took the last of what her mother had to give and went to the forest, to her grandmother, who, if the Nazis had known that her grandmother was there, they would have called her a witch and burned her. We've got some history that nobody wants to deal with. I don't believe that some wolf came along and all of a sudden she was like, oh, I'm so excited. No, she did what her mother told her to do, and we don't hear about her mother anymore because her mother died. And she was in one of those holes that nobody knows where she is. But if you want the sex of it, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. I mean, there's some history going on here.
Right.
And you young ladies are telling me something that I'm just sitting here and I'm like, whoa, this is 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, what is this fantasy you're living in? And you said heterosexual, but what's that got to do with it?
I mean, you know, speaking from my experience, I know that for sure. I think that with a lot of queer communities, the idea of love and the liberation that can occur through love.
I'm not going to fight with that, any of this for a minute.
Right.
But I don't like the word queer, because I don't think there's anything queer about who you want to sleep with, who you want to make love to, who you want to be in love. I don't think anything's queer about it.
So you don't think that reclamation is valid?
I think it's a terrible, terrible word to use. I do. I just think it's a terrible word to use. Oh, you're queer. I think the queerest thing in the world is some white man who's old shooting some black 14-year-old in the back and killing him. That's queer. I think it's queer that Donald Trump got he lied to be president of the United States. You're talking about queers and aliens. I think that's queer. And then he also was going to overthrow the United States. That's queer. What is normal about that? Yeah. And I know that the sex that he purchased he paid a lot of money for it because we know at least a couple of the women he paid $100,000 for because we got the checks. This is history, right? That's queer. And I don't know if you all pay for your sex, but I didn't. And so I think that's normal. You're going to get a lot of letters on this one.
I think so.
I hope so.
I think so because there are, you know, even just last week I was having dinner with a friend who is a man, identifies as a man, and only sleeps with men, but would never call himself gay. He only calls himself queer because for him that's more of an expansive
It's
term.
a liminal space. It's like it's the in-betweenness of it that I think people have embraced. That they say gay meant one thing in the media, in society, in the way that you were treated. And a lot of what that meant or how it's been proliferated is racialized, is class-based. And I think that especially for a lot of young Black people, like exploring love for the first time, they think, oh, you know, I don't feel what gay looks like in the media or what lesbian looks like. I feel this in-between. And I think, you know, the fuzzy feeling of in-between is something that even as someone that is heterosexual, I completely relate to. Like when you're 16 and you feel like, you know, you're getting those feelings for the first time, you're like, this is something I really can't pinpoint. And even at this age, at 25, I can't pinpoint what that was. And I think people run with that I don't know if I'll ever be able to pinpoint exactly.
But I think it's also, there are some people who would say, to hell with those poles, to hell with that binary of, you know, you're straight or you're gay.
Right.
And queerness is not necessarily a liminal space to them. It's more of a way of shirking that like line altogether.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I think that's like slightly different from feeling like you are in relationship to the heterosexual
I see what you're saying. So it's
structure.
not stepping outside of it, it's stepping beyond it, from what I understand.
Or flying, or
flying,
swimming
or
under
leaping,
it.
or swimming.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I think to me, coming through segregation, because mind you, I think that the most important thing that's happening right now is the transgender movement. And I'm really very, very proud of the transgender youngsters because they have decided that they will decide who they are and what they want to be called. And it's only fair that we respect them.
Right.
And I'm a big space freak. So I see that the transgender youngsters, because they are all of the races, and basically, as you know, as a construct, but I see the transgender youngsters are the ones who are helping to take planet Earth into the galaxy, because we're going to run into other life forms that our gender does not matter. So two things happening for me on this stage with you right now, you two, is that I think that the transgender kids get to call themselves what they want to call themselves, excuse the kids, but they're younger than I am. I think that women who want to have abortions have a right to their bodies and to do whatever it is that they want to do with it. And I think everybody else has a right to call themselves what they want to call themselves. I just think that you have a right to name yourself. And we came through slavery. And so there's a song, and I'm a big fan of spirituals. There's a song that says, if anybody asks you who you are, your grandmother, your mother would tell you that when they sold you away from her. If anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. And that's probably the last thing that you heard your mother say to you when some alien, queer son of a bitch sold you away from her. There was another word I almost used, but we're on television. You have to have a right to yourself. That's what we're saying here. And love is a part of that. You have to have not just the right to give love, but the right to receive it, however you want to do it.
and I think I want to intervene here because I think what you're saying, that self-naming, so much of authorship, it's about authority and taking authority. And so maybe I'll ask you, Doreen, and direct it to you first. Where does love fit into your process of maybe self-authority, but also actual authorship? Like when you're writing about culture, about society, about the way things are moving, is love at the origin of it, or is it the achievement of it? Because I know it's there, because I'm a big fan, and I've read so much of your work, and I can tell there's this subtle, you know, coming together of things that feels like love. Something pushing people at least to be smarter at the very least, which for me is so big on love, is asking people think a little bit harder than you're used to. That's a huge process of love for me. So where is it for you?
I think being in the position of the critic, it's so funny because the critic has a terrible rap out of all the writers that exist. And people tend to think that critics write from a place that is maybe closer to hate or a place that's closer to pomposity. And for me, it's all about a kind of uncontrollable adulation for the arts. Like, I am obsessed with people who make art. I'm obsessed with people who are willing to put their opinion in some shape or form and put it out into the world. And I kind of think of the critic as, if anything, providing a service. Nominally, that service is to the reader. Maybe it's to the artist, but really the service is to your own self. It's that I have been so moved, whether you feel negatively or positively about the work, I don't think actually matters, but you feel so moved that you have to extract what you think about this thing on the page. And so I don't even know, process is a word that if I'm using it, I'm not being honest about what my writing life is like.
When I think process for me as a writer literally means sitting in front of a computer or a notebook and then typing. Like, that's it for me. I don't sip tea or, put on mood lighting. That was never, I'm like, whatever people's version of that.
You're not professionalizing
a typewriter.
something.
Yeah, it's
Right.
very, for me, it's like, it's an urge, like, I mean, not like sex, but close to it. Where it's like, oh, I got something to say.
It's not unlike sex.
It's
not unlike
it's like,
sex,
I mean, it
would
is
say.
like the ecstasy of finishing it. It's definitely
I have
something.
another question as an old woman sitting here. Being a Haitian, you're talking about smart. One of the great writers in the world is Edwidge Datigan, who is
Create
Haitian,
dangerously.
right? And I'm wondering, what's the water you people are drinking?
Right.
We're getting some brilliant folks out of Haiti.
Yeah.
There's a whole, don't you think? I mean, look at what you're producing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't look at you while you tell me.
They'll tell you that, right? It's too much. It's too much. It's
that
too much.
I'm doing good work, but I don't know. I think Haitians, we're artists as a people, and we're also fighters. We're warriors.
Oh, right.
I don't know if you saw a couple of days ago, I take issue with the way it was presented because it's the New York Times, which we all know is a colonialist project. But they did this huge package on the debt that France forced Haiti to pay.
I saw it.
Over the past 2 centuries, and they make this estimation that CLR James, so many people have made before, but the Times has to act like they figured it out. $115 billion or something like that. So you have to imagine that weight. If you can like transfer that amount of money into psychological duress, that's what Haitians are raised under. So